Hi everyone. Last week I detailed the background and history of the iconic 1934 hit Blue Moon. We saw how it was given several different sets of lyrics multiple times before it finally became a hit, and how after this it grew into an iconic song that has been covered numerous times by several different artists and was featured in multiple films and television programs. But we ended without getting into a fairly recent claim that the traditional account of this song's origin is a lie, and that it was not actually written by the popular songwriting team of Rodgers and Hart, as is always assumed to have been the case. This claim has been made by journalist and documentary filmmaker Roman Gallese. She says that Blue Moon was actually written by her father, Edward W. Roman, years before Rodgers and Hart allegedly wrote it, and they actually stole the song from him. So, let's take a look at these claims, which, if true, would drastically alter the traditional story of the origin of the hit song Blue Moon. Gallese claims that her father wrote Blue Moon back in 1931 when he was just 17 years old. She says he wrote both the music and lyrics and then sent it to a songbroker, a person who knew how to manage the music industry and get a song published. And that while this songbroker sent her father back a letter saying he was interested in the song and would work to get it published, as long as he received his $27 fee, her father never responded, sent him money, or did anything else with his song. She claims that after this, the songbroker somehow got Edward Roman's song to someone at MGM, where Rodgers and Hart were working at the time. That person might have been MGM's music publisher, Jack Robbins. And that from there, Rodgers and Hart took the song, gave it new lyrics several times, until they were finally forced to revert back to the original lyrics. The song then went on to become a hit, and upon hearing it on the radio, Edward Roman was convinced to bring a lawsuit against Rodgers and Hart and a few other people, claiming that they had stolen his song. And that the result of this lawsuit was a settlement for $900 or $1,200 or maybe even $1,500 that Roman ultimately used to buy a car. So it's quite the claim, but does it hold up? Well, there is some evidence which seems to back up a bit of this story, but I don't think there's enough to prove that Edward Roman wrote this song. Let's go through some of it and I'll explain why. The evidence can be broken down into four main points, which include stories Gallese heard from her family over the years, newspaper articles detailing her father's lawsuit, other songs that her father wrote, and perhaps most importantly, the actual letter from the songbroker to whom Roman had sent his song. And all of these are fairly well presented on her website, bluemoonsong.org, if you want to go and look at them yourself. Now, the genesis of this whole idea comes from various stories Gallese heard from assorted family members over the years. She details these on the somewhat rambling and roundabout memoir page of her website. But some of them are as follows. Her uncle once told her that her father definitely wrote the music and maybe the lyrics to Blue Moon. Another uncle once told her to go look in the attic and then, quote, "You'll see, they changed the quarter notes to eighth notes, that's all." Her cousin's wife told her that her cousin often said that Gallese's father wrote Blue Moon, although probably not the bridge. And she also shares the story of when, at about 10 years old, after hearing various whispers about all this, she asked her father directly if he wrote the song. And while he didn't say yes, he didn't say no either, and then went on to tell her a story about how when he was younger and went out ice skating, he noticed that the moon reflected blue on the ice. So, while all of this is interesting and certainly served as the catalyst for Gallese to want to find out more, none of this is conclusive evidence at all. It's all hearsay and rumors, none of which is really internally consistent. It really sounds like just a family legend that some families have, that everyone talks about but doesn't necessarily have any basis in fact. But there was another bit of family lore that actually did have a bit of evidence to it, and that is the lawsuit her father brought against Rodgers and Hart, MGM, Jack Robbins, MGM's music publisher, and the songbroker to whom Roman originally sent his song. When Gallese did go up into the attic after her father's death in 1992, although she didn't find the original song her father supposedly wrote, she did find multiple newspaper clippings talking about this lawsuit. Again, these are all detailed on her website, as is a PDF of actual court records of the lawsuit, and serve to prove that her father really did claim in a legal filing in October 1936 that he wrote the words and music to Blue Moon. A later newspaper article from 1952 also relates that the end result of this lawsuit was a $1,500 settlement paid out to Edward Roman. Now, this is interesting, but this doesn't prove that Roman wrote Blue Moon, only that he claimed he wrote it. And the settlement doesn't necessarily prove that MGM and the others had stolen the song, only that perhaps they wanted to avoid lengthy litigation or potentially negative press. Now, the next bit of evidence Gallese offers up is not related to the origins of Blue Moon directly, but simply serves, supposedly, to establish that Roman had the ability to write Blue Moon. She says that one question she often gets when talking about this is, didn't the person who wrote a song as good as Blue Moon write any other songs? So there's a section on her website that shares other songs Roman wrote. But this bit of evidence doesn't seem very strong and actually seems to undermine her claim a bit. Because, you see, there's only 4 songs that he supposedly wrote, and he actually only wrote the music to one of them, supplying the lyrics only for the other 3. Also, I don't think any of these other 4 songs seem to be on the same level as Blue Moon. It seems to me that someone who wrote Blue Moon would have had better other songs. But you can go and listen to the songs and decide for yourself. But again, this is all a bit beside the point. Nothing we've looked at gives us conclusive evidence that proves Roman wrote Blue Moon. But there is one piece of evidence which supports Gallese's claims a bit more than anything else so far. And that is the letter Roman received back from the songbroker. So let's go over that briefly. The songbroker to whom Roman sent his piece was a man named Jack Mahoney, who was actually a Tin Pan Alley songwriter who had written mostly lyrics, but also some music, to dozens of songs in the 19-teens, the most famous of which is When You Wore a Tulip and I Wore a Big Red Rose. In 1921, Mahoney decided to join the music publishing business, and shortly thereafter started Jack Mahoney and Associates, which promoted their services to potential songwriters in advertisements like this, offering to revise, compose, and arrange any songs sent in. And it seems that Roman heard about Mahoney somehow, maybe from seeing an ad like this in the paper, and decided to send in his composition. And Mahoney sent Roman back a letter, and that letter is included on Gallese's website and gives us the most direct evidence we have about this whole issue. Unfortunately, it's not all good news for Gallese's claim. See, Gallese and Roman himself, in his lawsuit in 1936, claimed that Roman wrote both the words and music to Blue Moon. But if we read through Mahoney's letter in full, it's quite clear that what Roman sent in was only lyrics to a song. Here's the letter, dated January 12, 1932, and it starts off with Mahoney telling Roman that he has accepted Roman's number titled Blue Moon. So, from here we can see that Roman really did send in a work titled Blue Moon. So, at least that's cleared up. But is this the same Blue Moon as the one we know and love today? If we read on, we see that Mahoney offers to compose the musical setting for Roman's number. This seems to indicate that Roman didn't send in any music, but only lyrics. And on the next page, it continues, with Mahoney promising to wed Roman's poem to an inspired melody. And further on, it states that Roman will be listed as author and Mahoney as composer. And then finally, there's a section where Mahoney justifies his fee by stating, "You must realize that a poem without a musical setting has no financial value, and it is next to the impossible to secure music publishers' contracts for same." From all of these quotes, it becomes quite clear that the only thing Roman sent in to Jack Mahoney was a poem, lyrics without music. It is this piece of evidence which throws the biggest doubts upon the claim that Roman wrote both the music and lyrics to Blue Moon. And Gallese doesn't give a good explanation for this discrepancy, or even really acknowledge this anywhere on her website. Now, it is possible that Roman wrote just the lyrics to the song Blue Moon, as we know it today, but the main claim has always been that he wrote both music and lyrics, and this letter seems to thoroughly disprove that claim. Of course, the best piece of evidence would be a copy of the original poem that Roman wrote, so we could all see for ourselves if it was really the same Blue Moon as what came out later. But apparently, this is nowhere to be found. Gallese says on the memoir page that one of the newspaper articles that wrote about the lawsuit stated that Roman's original song, along with the letter from Mahoney, was in the hands of Roman's attorney. But when Gallese contacted that same law firm recently, they informed her that the firm had moved in the 1950s and those records hadn't made the transition. So, the conclusive piece of evidence is apparently lost, and without it, there's just no way to prove that Roman was the real author of the song Blue Moon, whether we're talking about just the lyrics or the music as well. And there are some major questions that also cast doubt on this claim as well. Perhaps the biggest question that is unanswered is how and why would Jack Mahoney send Roman's poem to MGM, Rodgers and Hart, or Jack Robbins? Did he even know any of them? Gallese mentions on her website that in 1921, Mahoney worked in the same building as Robbins, but that's it. There's no evidence I've seen that shows he knew any of those people or would be inclined to send them this poem. Another interesting point is that it seems like Roman didn't even really want to file a lawsuit at first, and perhaps only did so under pressure from his future brother-in-law Chris. And none of the rest of the family really seemed too supportive of this lawsuit either. Gallese says this is probably because only Chris spotted what it meant for the song to be played on the radio. Only he had the wherewithal to insist that something must be done. But it seems a little silly to me that no one else would realize this, given how popular Blue Moon was during 1935. It's also worth mentioning here that from her descriptions, this brother-in-law Chris was vocal and aggressive, would later on hit his own son, and was so upset when he learned Roman had settled the lawsuit, broke down Roman's door, punched Roman's future wife, his own sister, and threatened to kill Roman when he found him. Could it be possible that Chris, upon learning Roman had once written a poem that shared the name of a hugely popular song, aggressively pushed Roman into filing a lawsuit that he perhaps didn't want to? Of course, that's just supposition, and we don't really know, but it could explain why no one else, including Roman himself, seemed eager to actively pursue litigation. The last thing to point out is that it seems a little fishy that there's no copy of the original poem Roman wrote. He apparently gave it over to his attorney, but would he not have made a copy or taken a picture of it beforehand? He also gave the letter from Jack Mahoney to his lawyer, but he still apparently had a copy of that. And Gallese states on her website that when Roman sent in his original poem to Mahoney back in late 1931 or early 32, he carefully mailed a copy to himself that same day so that the postmark would serve as proof. If he was that careful when he first sent it in, why would he not have done something similar when he gave it to his lawyer? It's also worth mentioning here that, unsurprisingly, no one associated with the legacy of Rodgers and Hart seems to take these claims seriously. Ted Chapin, the chief creative officer of the Rodgers and Hammerstein organization, said that the story seems a little far-fetched. And Robert Kimball, who edited the complete lyrics of Loren's Heart with Hart's sister-in-law Dorothy, said, "I don't believe Blue Moon was written by someone other than Rodgers and Hart." So, taking all this evidence and information into consideration, what really did happen? My best guess is that Edward Roman wrote a poem in 1931 he titled Blue Moon, that probably had no relation beyond the title to the actual later song, and sent it into Jack Mahoney in the hopes it could be turned into a song. But then, for some reason, maybe he didn't have the money, maybe he thought it was a scam, whatever, he didn't sign the contract and follow through with the offer he received, and that was the last of that specific poem. However, he had probably told his family about it, including his future brother-in-law Chris, and when the real Blue Moon came out, Chris either thought it was actually his song, or maybe just thought it was close enough that they could try to make some money from it. It's also possible that the poem Roman wrote had a few similarities lyrically to the final song, although they were written separately and independently. We know it had at least the same name. It might have had some similar lyrics, such as being alone or wanting to find love. And that could explain why MGM settled instead of pursuing litigation, since there was maybe actually some similarity between the two songs. Anyways, no one will really know, and we can't say for sure. But that's another reason I tend to view Gallese's claims with skepticism. She presents everything on her website as absolute proof that her father wrote the song, and doesn't seem to entertain the idea that he might not have. The way she writes and presents information on her site doesn't seem to be terribly objective. She appears to ignore anything that goes against her already established position, like the reference to there only being lyrics in the Songbroker letter. It seems to me that she's not so much interested in the truth as she is in proving her claim, about which she's already made up her mind. But as for me, unless further evidence comes out, it seems unlikely that Edward Roman wrote Blue Moon, certainly the music and probably even the lyrics. And without any further evidence, I don't think this claim is good enough to challenge the established history and origin of this iconic and classic song. But if you're still not convinced, you can head over to Gallese's website and decide for yourself. Thanks for watching.